All right, we are live, buddy boyos, here in New York. It's J Tahoe's fabulous stream, number 20. I have with me tonight, I've got Blackpill 2021. How's it going, man?
It's going pretty well. I'm in New Jersey as we speak. So tri-state area, East Coast.
Exactly, so close I could get in my manlit mobile and come pay you a visit.
Yeah, I saw that recent video. It was like the man-led MTV Cribs edition, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was just showing off my manlit house. We actually have different housing, believe it or not. It's pretty crazy. But
Yeah, yeah, I got that impression.
we are missing First, who was supposed to be joining us, and I know he works about 90 hours a week. So my guess would be that he fell asleep or something because he hasn't gotten back to me in a while. But I do hope he makes it onto the show because I know he's got some opinions on some of the stuff that we're going to talk about tonight. And I think we've got a pretty good line of topics lined up, and we may get into some callers later on if there's time. So BP 2021, you want to tell us a little about yourself and your background without going, too into detail. Don't dox yourself, but you can tell us a little bit about your background and expertise.
Sure. So I've been watching this incel content now for almost the past 2 years, and I'd say the channels that I frequented the most, obviously, as you all know, Face and LMS and Incel TV, and became very clear to me that these two guys were the ones that they had the most dense archives. They were the ones that were the most devoted to putting out content. They had very particular ideas that, especially in the case of Face and LMS, he tried to tie them. He still does. He tries to tie them to a hard, fast science known as biology. And I think the reason why he wants to do that is because ultimately Face and LMS is after a certain fatalism. He likes that fatalistic aspect that the black pill gives you. But the black pill does more than that because he wants to bind his principles, his ideas, to a hard, fast science such as biology that could give him more of a bulletproof case. The reasons why that is, we could get into that, at least my speculation. But it became clear to me that this is what Face and LMS, this is what his specialty was. He was trying to answer a question that we've always been, wondering ourselves: why do women seek out the men that they do? And he presented a lot of ideas, and it became clear he had his own model, and he tried to pin this model to a very epic field of study known as biology. And the way he would make his content, it became clear that he wanted that fatalism. And after about maybe a year and a half, uh, I said to myself, okay, well, it's not like I'm a normie who is just coming out of the blue and I'm just trying to now make my own content without giving these people a fair shake. I've listened to what they've had to say. I've went back, I've watched all their videos. I am very now much familiar with the subculture that is the incel sphere. It's not like I'm a normie that hasn't given them any time of day or a peace of mind or any. It's not like I haven't given them the proper attention. I've done my homework. I really have given fair thought into everything they've said. But now, if I'm being honest, I see a number of things that I question, both from an actual biological perspective. If you want to actually talk about Darwinian biology and evolutionary biology and what it means to actually conduct fair and faithful research and investigation, I question a lot of things that they do and a lot of conclusions that they make. In addition to that, when I look at the actual subculture, I also wonder about the ethics of this subculture. In a lot of ways, I think it's a fucking joke. And I felt compelled to make some content. And so Blackpill 2021, that's the channel I made. And the reason why I call it that is because deep down, I don't think a lot of these people are really blackpilled, including Face and LMS himself. Because if we're staying faithful to what the black pill is really about, it's about getting to the truth, being able to accept that truth, no matter how hard that pill is to swallow. But when I see the stuff that these incels do, when I listen to their copes, when I see how some of them will swallow certain pills, but they'll skimp out on other pills, when I see Faison Elmes himself go about what he does, where he's this fake cell, frauding as an incel, where he wants to control this environment where he wants to act like he's an incel, but by his own criteria, he wouldn't even qualify for his own Discord server. I mean, that to me alone is absurd. When I think about the dead horses he beats over and over again, really for no productivity at all, when I think about the amount of years he's had to formulate ideas, and this is the best he has to show for it. When I think about the way that he superficially handles, all of these statistical analyses, and when he picks from biased samples and ignores the fact that they're biased, when he takes certain things and he extrapolates them, when he tries to wield biology so he can, fabricate all of these mythological ideas as to why women seek out certain faces, when he tries to pin lookism to a Darwinian idea, all of these things, it's very irresponsible. It's really just bullshit. And I think at the end of the day, because he does all of these things, also because, if you look at his content history, I've been more vocal about this, but it's very clear to me he has his own biases. He will lay into making content about certain groups of people, especially races, but he'll skimp out on other races. So you can tell, based on his own body of evidence, look in his archives. He definitely, lays into more races than others. He's very sparing of his own race.
Let me just read out this comment here. Sorry to cut. Lloyd says, "Is anyone concerned with polypharmacy with all these pills? Well, don't overdose on too many pills." But anyway, sorry. Continue.
Right. So Blackpill 2021, it's basically calling out the fact that a lot of these guys aren't blackpilled. They say they are, but they're not. Facing LMS, he's not really blackpilled, because until he demonstrates that he could go and he could, make the content, for instance, about his own race, but he won't. The fact, until he makes those content about certain phenomenons that he leaves out, he leaves them out because they run counter to his own beliefs, and he doesn't like that. So until he demonstrates that he can actually cover and do, an honest showing of reality, then this guy, he's not really black-pilled, and he himself is just a coper. And that's why I made this channel, to call all of these people out on it.
Now, I wanted to ask you, without going too much into detail or doxing yourself, now you have some expertise in the actual field of biology, correct?
Yeah, I went to I don't want to dox myself, but I went to a very good school on the East Coast, and majored in chemistry, minored in biology. I had a channel for a brief time about a year and a half ago, and I showed one of the awards that I won in chemistry. I've worked in a number of laboratories on the East Coast, all tied to academic learning hospitals. And so this is something that I've done. I'm very familiar with the research methodology. I'm very familiar with working alongside research assistants and primary investigators. I'm very familiar with a lot of this Darwinian biology, because I did study some of it. And I could tell you right now, a lot of the assertions that incels make, a lot of the claims, when they think they know about evolutionary biology, it's completely false. And Darwin himself wouldn't have signed off on a lot of the things that they claim. And it's an example where the incels in Face and LMS, they'll take certain nodes in biology, but then they'll improvise them, they'll co-opt them to fit their own narrative. But it's just an example of how they pick and choose things. They're not actually staying faithful to true Darwinian biology. And if you want, we could get into that, but that is what I'm seeing as it is right now in the incel sphere.
Right. No, I 100% agree with you, which is why I felt it was so necessary that we had this stream, because these are arguments that, my arguments against some of Face and LMS's arguments have greatly evolved from, my blue pill debacle on his stream, in 2018, to, a point where I'm sharpening them, because, like, if we're honest with ourselves, right, this, like, it's over mentality, and, like, the average guy can't get a girlfriend anymore. I mean, it just, like, all you have to do is go outside to see that that's clearly bullshit. And and again, I don't even I acknowledge that looks are important. I just like the degree to which Face and LMS pushes this, and some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight that are observable, and plenty of studies to back them, right, are going to prove that that's clearly bullshit. And so the first thing I wanted to get into that we were discussing is the increasing average age of fertility. Um, here since 1960, right, and I can I can link the study, later, right? Where we found in the United States since 1960, the average age of fertility was 24. It's 29 now and rising into the 30s. So you brought this up in one of your channels, right? Face and LMS. And by the way, I invited Face and LMS onto this stream, to defend his position on everything. I messaged him on Discord. I said, hey, come and defend your position. I don't like to, just pick somebody apart and not give them a chance to defend themselves. But I guess he's busy or doesn't care or doesn't think he can make a good argument against it. But if I were my question to Face an LMS, right? Because we've seen in his content, he's always saying like, oh, women are just slaves to their biology. They just chase Chad and they can't help it. They're just slaves to their biology and they follow a biological imperative. But you raised the point. If that were true, we know that a woman's prime fertility years are late teens to early 20s. So if that were true, why wouldn't you see women rushing in droves to to grab Chad and produce offspring with him, between like 16 and 23? If that were true, then that's what we would see happening. Whereas, the science is showing us, right? The data shows us that the average age of fertility just gets, is getting pushed back and pushed back, and women are having babies later and later. So, can you tell us why do you think, what's the disconnect there?
Right. So what you're talking about is something that is certainly a very worthy talking point. Uh, if we posit what Face and LMS, if we posit his stance that, we deep down are animals, women have this biological imperative, they are ultimately slaves to this very primitive, carnal, primal, animalistic, instinctual, impulsive firmware that rests in their neurological brain, then they are living their life on this track that is basically to live out this Darwinian goal, which is to maximize their fitness. That is what lies at the crux of what Darwin talked about in his idea of natural selection. The whole idea of natural selection is to specifically select for a mate, which you can call mate selection, to optimize fitness. That is at the crux of classical natural selection. And that it also fits in this narrative that women will do what they should in order to optimize and facilitate the most successful reproductive success. And what that would entail is that when a woman is in her peak fertility, which medical practitioners and biologists have a very sweeping consensus of, that's going to be in their mid 20s. The window for peak fertility in women starts in their late teens and it ends in their late 20s, making like the mid 20s that prime time when a woman could really optimize her reproductive success rate and fitness. So if women are ultimately on this track where they ultimately are slaves to these biological imperatives, and human physiology and behavior carries out along this path that Face and LMS wants to advertise as this very primal and instinctual and genetic based path, then women should actually seek out a mate when they are the most fertile, because that would fall in line, that would be sensible to his model that he's improvised. But as you said, in reality, we're not seeing that. The data doesn't reflect such a reality. What we're seeing actually, especially in the more modern and first world countries, women at their own volition are opting to put the time in which they conceive a child into their 30s now. That's becoming more and more of a trend. And the thing is that also makes this so striking is that this change has happened very quickly. It's not like this is some. It's not like this has evolved. This has changed over like many decades. This has happened within only a few decades. This change, this delta this change over time has happened with only in a few decades. And, that raises a question. If everything that Face and LMS posits, if, his Darwinian idea of life and human physiology and women's mate selection, if all of that really is so Darwinian, it doesn't make sense because they're not optimizing their fitness with this behavior. And, just to add on to what you're saying, another thing that would also be problematic to Face's idea, and I've raised this before, if you look in high schools are very there are a very interesting ecosystem in that a girl in her high school years, she's not socially contracted or socially obligated as a real world woman is. I know that a lot of the sentiment in the incel sphere is that the reason why women have become more picky, and perhaps the reason why they are now able to chase their true biological ambition, is because with the advent of female empowerment, it has freed them to do so. They are no longer shackled to social and financial restraints that they once had at an earlier point in time. However, in high schools, females have never had such restraints. If you're a high school student, you never had the responsibility to have to find a provider. You never had the responsibility to find a job, to pay rent. You never had these obligations. So if Face and LMS, once again, if what he says is true, if his model really is true, then what we should have seen at the inception of high school is young women doing this type of behavior, putting themselves in limbo to secure the Chad. But what we actually see in high schools, just like the real world and just like fertility, over the last few decades, both dating and sexual intercourse, right, sexual activity, both of those things have declined. In high schools, they've precipitously dropped off, especially if you talk about dating. And that's only happened in the last few decades. So fertility, sexual practice, the amount of sexual partners, and dating, all of these things have declined alongside one another in the last few decades. And because we have these changes, because we have these deltas, it makes you wonder, why are these deltas occurring? Because biologically, we as a species, we haven't changed. Our biology has been fixed, basically. There's been no biological change in our genome. Thus, what could account and attribute for these deltas? It can't be our biology because our biology has been static. So it makes you wonder, where are these changes coming from? What's caused these changes?
Let's just, I want to read out this comment. We've got a couple of comments, but Windows Minus just brought up a good point. He said, nah, in high school, it went down for men and not women and Chads. No, actually, the most recent data that I'd seen is that the amount of self-reported sex, right, sexual activity for both men and women had declined. Like, yes, it is less sexually active men, but there was also, in percentage-wise, women had dropped as well by nearly the same amount. And you can say, oh, well, that's self-reporting. There's going to be noise in the data. But the thing is, when you compare it to the previous generations, right, that was all self-reported as well, too. So it's a consistent drop. The other generations were self-reported, too. So what would cause, such a steep decline, even if it was self-reported?
Right. The protocols were constant. Thus, all of the baselines were done with the same metrics.
You had a control, and that's one of my main arguments about Face and LMS. What makes me want to scream is when people tell me the black pill science, bro. It's just science. Lookism's just science. We can prove it with these Tinder experiments, and I'm like, first of all, there was no control group here because everybody tells me gym maxing is cope and it's bullshit. And we'll get to cope how low IQ of an argument that is. But so every Chad that Face and LMS used in his Chad fishing experiment was ripped. Like, he didn't take one. I would have liked to have seen a normal body or even like a fat Chad and see how he did. And then second of all, he didn't show us how many total swipes the Chad had, right? We all we know is he got like 300 messages, which is a lot more than like an average guy gets. And I'm not arguing that obviously like a Chad on Tinder is going to get a lot more messages. That's obvious. But my point is, like, there was no control group for one, which you need in any experiment, right? And two, he didn't show us the amount of women who didn't respond, ghosted, or just didn't message back at all. There was no, like, he won't release all the data. And it's either A, he doesn't have it because he didn't think it would be important, or B, he doesn't want to show us that because it's going to be a little more telling than the. And this is something that I've said, right? Like that, the media outlets do at the time. They show the data. They manipulate data to show to make it look like a certain phenomena is happening, but they don't show you everything for you to take into consideration. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm sorry. Did you get that message on Discord? I don't know if you're able to share something on stream.
Did I get a message on Discord?
Yeah,
I could. Well, I don't have Discord up on my computer right now, but I can.
Okay. I was emailing, well, not emailing, sorry. I was messaging you some graphs that I have this in one of my videos. I looked into this already specifically about high schools. There's been a universal drop off in the amount of sexual activity in both men and women since going back to like the 1970s to now. It's been a steady decline in all of these things. So basically what I'm saying is if women were always supposed to be biologically attuned to how face analysis purports, then from the inception of high school, you should have always had women act on their biological ambition. But we don't have that. We had a delta. We had a change over time. Thus, that means that something had to cause that change. And it can't be our biology because our biology has been fixed. And it wouldn't be this female empowerment because high school students never were victim to those types of contracts and obligations and expectations. So a girl in high school has full contract and license to act upon her innermost biological desire, which is to chase the Chad. But if that was really always going on, if women were always biologically destined to be like that, then from the inception in high school, we should have seen that. That should have been the initial value set in the delta, and that should have remained constant. However, it didn't. It wasn't the initial value. We had.
Let me just again, I don't want to get too far behind in the comments, but I do think you're right. And I'm gonna email that graph to myself so we can bring it up and dissect that a little more. Let me just call this out. The control group is ourselves and how different we get treated compared to Chads in the experiment. Okay, but you're not factoring your behavior, what's written in the profile. There's so many things like you're not considering there. And how you get treated in real life versus the chats. It's just like this. It's so much more nuanced than that.
Well, I feel like at this point we're almost
That's not the control group.
Well, I feel like we're almost talking about two different things now. Like I'm not trying to disqualify guys' feelings or the struggle.
Right. Of course. Like if you go on one of those apps and you don't get any matches, like I'm sure that's a really brutal feeling. I get that, but I'm like, it's like we're using Tinder, which is at the end of the day. It's a fuck app. Like,
right. All I'm trying to do is I'm trying to assume, right, Darwinian biology to the model that Face and LMS has laid out. That's all I'm trying to do, and I'm trying to point out inconsistencies where Darwinian biology, if what Face and LMS purports is actually true, then there are a number of phenomenons that gravely challenges that idea. That's all I'm trying to point out. I'm not trying to turn this into it. That last comment almost felt like it was about something else, but I'm not trying to qualify any guy's feelings about what it's like to be an incel. That's not what this discussion is about.
Right. This is about the scientific validity of Face and LMS's thesis of lookism.
But like you said, but the fertility, right? I mean, look. As Darwinian as it gets, if we pay faith to natural selection, the whole idea of that is for a woman to select to optimize her fitness and the fitness of her offspring. Thus, we should see women, as you said, we should see them do their mate selection when they're the most primed, when their fertility is maximized, to optimize her reproductive success. But we're seeing something that's counterintuitive to that. So, it begs more questions. It, at the very least, says Face and LMS, his ideas of trying to weave in Darwinian biology, he has to hit the brakes on that. And we have these new questions that really have to get answered. At least more thought has to get put into them.
Right. And Lloyd says you can't reproduce data if you have a biased person running the study. I mean, yes and no. Like, I do think that look, like for me, that's science. If you can recreate an experiment with replicable results, then yeah, that is scientific. My point is that you're using Tinder, which you discussed in one of your videos. You have a different type of person typically who would use Tinder. Less than 10% of the population uses Tinder. And you talked about this in one of your videos. It's almost like there's a different type of person who would use Tinder as opposed to the general population. Is that right?
Yeah, but I almost feel we have to be careful because this could almost like branch into different discussions. I almost feel like that's what happens in the incel sphere. It's like there's original discussion and then someone raises a question, but that like it almost doesn't even address the main gist of what was being discussed. It's not to say that it's invalid, it just wasn't exactly relevant. Getting back to what you said about Tinder, yeah. First actually knows much more about this than I do. But if you look at Tinder, first of all, Tinder would only qualify as one dating app, right? Tinder doesn't even qualify as dating apps. We know that in the umbrella of online users, only about 10% of all online users actually use dating sites. But Tinder is only one of the dating sites, so it's actually less than 10%. And if you look at the people who make Tinder, who use Tinder, if you look at the age demographic, you look at the earning bracket, you look at the location, like the region, and you look at the race, it the lion's share of who makes up Tinder, it's definitely it's it's a very specific type of profile. If you're going to use that as your benchmark to as like a 1-to-1 ratio for society at large, it's going to give you a very skewed representation.
Yes, and actually, that you 100%. That's what I'm saying. It's the skewing of the data, and this is a perfect comment where I wanted to call that out. Only the top 20% were considered average. Well, okay, so that's referring to the 2009 OkCupid study, where it was women only rated 20% of men above average, whereas and this is a commonly quoted study. Are you familiar with this study, the 2009 OkCupid study?
I think so. I think I actually know the one from 2008, but I bet you they're pretty much identical. So I'd say yes.
So here's the gist, right? Is that women rated 20% of men as above average, whereas men it was a normal bell curve distribution. And the study had 14 million participants. However, there was a lot of noise in that study that nobody wants to account for, such as we know that the typical makeup of a dating site is about 80-20 men versus 80% men versus 20% women. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean that's what everyone has basically said. So I have no
So,
reason to
so
disagree.
if that's true, then you're comparing how roughly like what would that be like 1.5 to 3 million women rated against 10 to 11 million men, and saying that that is not a controlled experiment. Those women were overwhelmed by the amount of choice that they had on that app. So of course, like you would have to really stand out to be rated above average because at that point you're just overwhelmed by choice that you shut down. So if you actually compared an equal amount of men to an equal amount of women as you would in a controlled experiment, I think you'd see a lot more of a standardized bell curve. So that's a problem with that data is that like once again we're ignoring the difference in sample size there and saying that that's science.
Right. Well, here's the thing. That data that they give, it is 100% accurate for the online dating scene. Like if we take data that represents what goes on, within the realm of Tinder or dating sites, no, I don't think anyone would disagree like that's false. We're not saying that uh, there isn't hardship with using those things. We're not denying that. I feel like we might be talking about something else here. We're not denying the hardships that exist with online dating, but we're trying to examine this question, like just how many women are really biologically set to act like this, because and I've made this distinction before. One of my previous videos, I refer to it. It's almost like if you think of like an economy, right? Like a free market economy. you have like a public sector and you have a private sector. And the way I think of it is like the public sector in this analogy would be like online dating sites, right? Because it's a low barrier to entry. There's no restriction. It's open to the public. Any guy could vie, in this competition where he competes for a woman in, through some type of low barrier channel, and it's really open to everyone. Then you have the private market sector. As you would think, it's private, so it's not really open to everyone. And the private market in this analogy would be, I don't know if you're familiar, but there are still a lot of cultural enclaves, ethnic enclaves, racial enclaves in the United States where women will date within their own community. These types of women, they don't resort to online dating because they have no reason to do so, because they know that either through their family, through their friends, through recreational activity, through school, through work, they're naturally going to have just a constant flow of potential suitors. They have no reason to go through this extra step of going online and having to meet some random stranger who potentially could be, a horror show where she can already socially vet and socially validate people in real life. The thing is, these people, again, it's like they're in the private market because they're never really on the market to begin with, because they're always getting, sequestered by a boyfriend. And two, it's like there's certain social, circumstances around these people. They're not really open to everyone. Thus, a lot of guys, they're forced to subjecting themselves to the open market, and they have to play these games of online dating. But what we're saying, it's not to discredit online dating metrics, but it's to, we're trying to raise a question: are all women really biologically destined to do this? That's a different discussion. That's the one that I'm more focused on.
Right. And to me, it's like the fact that and I have your graph, by the way. I'm gonna bring that up so we can dissect that. I just wanted to interject a couple of thoughts here and get to this comment. But right, that's the point I'm trying to make here is, like, if we were just slaves to this biological narrative or biological imperative, you would see women just trying to reproduce during their most genetically fit years, right? That window there, but it's just not happening. They're pushing it back. So that shows us, at the very least, that humans can resist their biological imperative, that we can use critical thinking in our conscious brain above our reptilian, instinct. Because we know we have, and this is getting more, I guess, into psychology than biology, but we know we've got our id, right? Our id, our ego, and our super ego. And some people are going to think that that's crap, but
that's
pretty much show that there's. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's Freudian, right? Sigmund Freud, his models. Yeah.
Right, but you could also say it's our reptilian brain, which is like, seek food, shelter, sex, our basic animalistic instincts. And then we have our conscious brain, which is critical thinking, being like, wow, is this a good choice? Like, our critical thinking brain, right? And then some people say we have our subconscious, which is where our thoughts that we don't actually think are, right? It's information that we have access to, but we can't explain how we access it. So what this should show us is that people can overpower their biological imperative and actually make like choices that require critical thinking. Otherwise, you just see a bunch of people, going around killing and raping and stealing. Like, obviously, human beings are capable of complex thoughts, so it's much more nuanced than that.
Right.
So, but let me read out this comment here. Women are overwhelmingly, because I wanted to call this out, women are overwhelmed by male attention on social media too. So this problem would exist for most women IRL too, and not just the kind of women who use Tinder. Use Tinder. Right. So yeah, they are overwhelmed by male attention, but it's not always. But that's the people who are on Tinder, right? Are the ones who are looking. The regular women who get blown up by dudes, like even my girlfriend will get like randomly like messaged by random dudes, and like it's like how like a Chad messaging. So first off, these Chads barely fucking exist, but like that's not going to be the only thing that stands out, right? You're going to have people, you're going to have like rich guys and stuff. There's so much more like nuance to it. It's not just like, oh, she's just looking for Chad. Like you don't see this in real life. Like the way real like when you walk like outside of the house and rationalize it. Like here's the thing, right? Like I when reality coincides with a scientific study, it's like okay, like that's fine. I accept it now. Like Newton's laws, right? If I drop an apple, it's gonna fall. All right. Like if and it's going to accelerate at whatever it is, 9.8 meters per second squared. Like you can do that time in and time out. And if I do that in reality, I'm going to see it. Okay, I accept that. It's a scientific law. But now you have this, you have these experiments where people are telling you, oh, it's replicable. Do it, it'll work online and that's fine. But then you go out in real life and what you see is not consistent with the data. So it's like, okay, the data is not telling us the full story here as it is in Newton's experiment. So we can't accept it as law because clearly there's a factor we're not getting here. And I think that's a problem too. I think for people like Face and LMS, it comes down to a matter of pride that they just don't want to admit that human beings don't understand every facet of attraction.
Right. I mean, that was a lot of incels might not know this, but that was one of Darwin's brutal realizations. I mean, just to real quickly give a brief summary, probably a lot of people know Darwin, one of his greatest contributions was natural selection. Natural selection, in a nutshell, was basically that nature selects for survival, that females of the species would seek certain traits in males because those traits were signaling that the male was better adapted for survival. He had greater survivorship being advertised in his traits. And that was how, females would go through their mate selection. That was natural selection originally. However, Darwin realized that while that model was good, he still found a lot of species that perplexed him because he realized there were still a lot of species on this planet that didn't conform to that, whereas females of many other species, they seemed to be attracted to certain traits, but those traits didn't seem to actually give that any type of survivorship or fitness related advantage. So Darwin, he was very perplexed. So what he realized was his current model of natural selection was insufficient. So he had to add to that model. And what he actually did was he proposed this additional subspecialty of natural selection known as sexual selection. And sexual selection, I think, at the crux of what the incel and Face and LMS wants to really talk about, they want to focus on sexual selection, not natural selection. Sexual selection is a more specific type of natural selection. But what Darwin realized himself was that it might just be, for whatever reason, certain traits are found to be more beautiful in the eyes of a female. But those traits at the end of the day might not actually have any relationship to any fitness or survivorship based, advantage.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but in the modern day, actual doctors and scientists, there's no published study that shows attractiveness correlated with genetic fitness. Is that right?
I mean, all right. So what I'll say, it could be challenging. I'm going to do my best to word this. If I understand your main gist, I would say yes, but I want to be a little more specific because it's easy for pundits to sort of pick this apart in ways that really aren't so honest. If we're talking about someone who has a facial deformity, if we're talking about someone who has a facial pathology, if we're talking about someone that had some type of malnourishment or some real X factor of a circumstance, and we compare that person to a good-looking person, and we say, oh, the good-looking person, they have a good-looking face, so they must be healthier than this, deformed or maladaptive individual. Sure, in that case, yeah, the better-looking person has the better genes, in a very crude way of saying it. My real discussion, though, is if we just take average people, right, and we compare them to quote-unquote good-looking people, we know that the treatment from women could be huge. If we take a guy with an average face and we compare him to a guy with a great face, the treatment he gets from a woman could be literally huge. It could be, a guy with a great face could, get, a whole lineup of attractive women wanting to date him. A guy with an average face might not get any attention at all. Yet that massive difference when it comes to mate selection that doesn't get reflected in any type of objective or measurable type of statistic or data. Medical practitioners, biologists of all sorts have never been able to examine the face. When you get down into the bony architecture of the face, these individuals have never been able to make those assignments and connections. So that's really what I'm talking about. Again, if you want to make like extreme cases and say, sure, a good looking person has better genes than someone who's like maladaptive or deformed, sure. But if we're talking about like a good looking person versus just like your perfectly normal gen pop individuals, you're not going to find any physiological connection between a beautiful looking face and any type of metric or data you could find in a clinical test that would suggest that there is this connection.
Right. And you have, and basically, like, it's not, there's no study that shows that these really attractive people even reproduce more than average people. Like, I don't know, have you ever seen the movie Idiocracy?
Was that with Owen Wilson?
It was with his brother, Luke Wilson.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I
I
remember
did,
they
yeah.
actually showed us that, like, it was like these like piggish, like average looking people who with like low IQs who kept reproducing, and society basically regressed because natural selection. People like natural, and I remember learning this in college. I had a great biology professor who explained this to us. Natural selection does not have an aim. It's simply what's selected for by the environment at the time. There's no reason that a species would get, there's no aim to make a species better or perfect or anything. It's just a result of what happened to be selected for by the environment at the time. And I propose this to face an LMS. It's like, okay, like this very primitive like caveman, like, oh, he's 6'2" and ripped and has a trauma resistant jaw. Maybe if you're a caveman, that was important for survival in those times. However, then you had, let's say, rather than the cave Chad, you had the cave normie who took a stone, sharpened it, and put it on the end of a stick, and he used it to go hunting or kill the mountain lion that was trying to threaten him or whatever. Now all of a sudden, now he is selected for by the environment. He's going to pass on his genes because he can easily just use the spear to kill the mountain lion or whatever, better than the cave Chad could, because we know that you can use tools to dominate the environment. Case in point, like we were talking about earlier, apes, chimpanzees, gorillas are way stronger than the average human. I mean, they said like if a gorilla trained, it could bench press like 4,000 pounds. It could freaking rip the strongest man in the world in half. So, but obviously, who lives in whose zoos, right? Gorillas live in our zoos. We've dominated their environment because IQ at the end of the day was selected for by the environment. We were using our IQ, opposable thumbs. We were able to create tools to conquer the environment. The same way that cave incel, right, or cave normie who invented the spear would have obviously been selected for over the better looking or taller guy or whatever, just because he used his IQ to basically accomplish more than that guy ever could.
Right. I mean, and now we're starting to scratch the surface of a number of things that I don't think a lot of incels really want to hear, but I'd say I don't think they're really familiar with their Darwinian biology. And this could be an example where it's too like brutal for them to have to accept. But if we're staying faithful and true to actual Darwinian biology, to touch on this first point, Darwin himself was a very firm believer that humans evolved from apes, specifically like the great apes, like you said. So the primates predominantly from Africa, and the thing about natural selection is, like you pointed out, nature selects for survival. But Darwin himself said that that was always specific to the environment, because the way in which a species would adapt and evolve, that was always specific to the environment that they were in, because not every environment was the same. Thus, certain traits would be more favorable and advantageous in one environment versus another. Getting back to what you touched on with the great apes, essentially natural selection, right? It's selecting for traits that maximize survivorship. If you subscribe to Darwinian biology, if you subscribe to, this whole idea of design and Mother Nature, then you have to stay true to what Darwin laid out, that humans evolved from primates. What we know is that primates are like chimps and gorillas are like 6, 8, up to 10 times stronger than, you know, your average man. Going from primates, we sacrifice so much ruggedness and strength and gross motor control and all of these physical prowess characteristics. We traded off. We lost those because Mother Nature, for whatever reason, wanted females from our common ancestor to start selecting for other traits, for traits that instead of traits that maximized maximal force production and physical prowess in those very primitive senses, we, you know, opted more for mobility and endurance. Biomechanically speaking, our joints, predominantly third-class levers, we lost a lot of strength. So, like, we lost a lot of this testosterone-bound, Giga Chad, caveman-like strength. If Mother Nature always wanted us to retain those things, then there wouldn't have been any evolution. We would have just remained with those traits in hand. Yet we moved away from those traits and we traded off to get other traits. That was how Mother Nature wanted us to select, and that's just the truth of it. And if you disagree with that, then you disagree with Darwin. So then don't pick and choose from Darwin's bag of ideas. It's a simple. At least be consistent. You don't have to subscribe to this, but then don't jump in Darwinian biology and pick things when you can't take on everything that Darwin himself proposed.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. It's either you're accepting the entire theory or none of it. Like, don't pick and choose. You know what I mean? Like, it's I agree. And by the way, I have the graph you wanted to show earlier. Let me just pull that up because I emailed that to myself here because I'm a boomer. But let's look at this, right? So is this Pew Research?
This was a graph that first gave to me. This is the one about high school, right? How dating precipitously dropped off in the last few decades.
Yes. Can you see my screen?
For some reason, like, I can't open up my internet browser really when I'm using voice chat, but I can pull up I should be able to pull up the image again though.
Okay, because
Okay,
I have the image up on the screen here for our viewers to see, but this is from first. This looks like this format looks like this. Yeah, this is from Pew Research. So obviously this is a very unbiased source that's just, great at collecting data here. So let's look at the drop off in the percentage of 12th graders who have ever dated from 1977 to 2014. And wow, that's pretty steep.
Right, yeah. I mean, if you're right, so it's starting all the way from the left side. It says 1977 going to 2014. The delta, right, once at 85% as the initial, and then we ended up, just under 60%, right, in only a few decades, really. It's like, and the fertility also has declined. I'm sure everyone is aware of that, and sex has declined. It's like all of these things have declined alongside one another, and it's very difficult to make a case that it's coming from a biological reason, because biologically we haven't changed. We haven't gone through any biological change. So if you want to jump into genetics for that explanation, you're going to be so hard pressed to do so. So it's like, okay, let's put biology to the side. Where else can we look that could account for all of these deltas? And
Right.
And that raises the question.
And that's why I've gotten into all this, because like I agree that inceldom is it is a problem, obviously, because you do have and you have all these factors like we know in society there are more men than there are more women in most countries. Here in the United States, I think it's like there's 125 men to every 100 women. So you already have the problem that some men are going to be left out no matter what before you even start. But my argument, based on all of this, is that this is not a biological issue. This is a sociological issue. It's a number of socioeconomic factors that are bringing us to where we have arrived, and that like Face and LMS just wants to like take the easy, incel TV just wants to take the easy way out and be like, Well, no, it's biology, bro. They just want Chad. When there's just so many other factors at play here. Like it's not, and we're not saying that like no, Chads aren't. Obviously, Chads are attractive. Obviously, Chads do really well, but it's at a point where it's not like this all or nothing. You want to talk about the all or nothing mentality that we were discussing before the show as well.
Sure, but could I just make one? Could I just like add one thing real quick?
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, just what you were saying. You were saying that Incel TV, Face and LMS, you know, they're always running to like what you call the easy way out, right? They want that low hanging fruit. Like they want to attribute so much of these explanations to lookism. It goes back to, you know, because they want that, you know, it's like they have that thirst for that fatalism. And if they can pin and attribute the reasons as to why we're seeing what we're seeing to lookism, and they could support it with their improvised biology, it gets them that fatalism that gives them that closure that, you know, can finally act as the explanation that they have. And it's also like the cheapest way to do so, because if you're basing it on lookism, then it's something that, you know, it truly is surface level. There really isn't much discussion beyond that other than just how bad it really sucks. But it gives them that like terminal velocity where that's basically the end of the line. That's that fatalistic, you know, I guess facet that they're after. And but, you know, to segue into what you were saying, as other people have come along, they've raised other ideas that illustrates that this very much is a multidisciplinary discussion, that, you know, there are many contributing factors that are all playing a role in this. And the focus should really be shifting towards looking at the full picture and trying to really take into account all of these different factors that are, you know, having a hand, as opposed to just looking at this from an extremely narrow perspective and reaching for that low-hanging fruit that Face and LMS and Incel TV, you know, love to do.
So yeah, and here's a point I wanted to address some of these comments, and then maybe we're almost an hour in. Maybe in a little bit we can actually go to some callers too. But the point I wanted, a thing that I fail to understand is that go on any incel Discord, any, you know, I'm not on .co because that's a little much for me. But all you're going to hear about my bone structure, bone structure this, bone structure that. And it's like there seem to be hyper focused in on the bone structure when that's one genetic marker out of many, many genetic markers, right? Like you could have great, robust bone structure and have a heart defect, be predisposed to cancer, have shitty eyesight, be balding, you know, have shit bone density, right? Have osteoporosis. I mean, it's like, you know, your bone structure is not indicative of your overall health.
Right. The thing is, I don't want to we're not denying lookism, and this is something that I've worried about. I feel like these two things get conflated, but that has to go in line with what you said. How
Jay is going to Bone Town. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Continue.
No, I was just saying. I think this almost falls in line with what you were getting to earlier. How people have this very binary, black and white, all or nothing perspective, where they don't really have the patience for the nuance. We're not saying that lookism doesn't exist. Like if that's what you're taking away, then you're misinterpreting everything that we're saying.
Right. Of course, lookism does exist. So we're clear.
Right. So, you know, for guys that want to, I'm not reading the comments, but if there are any people, sorry, I just had the big cup of coffee. If there are any people saying like, if there are anyone's, well, actually, are there any comments you want to address?
Yeah, actually, there was one here. Oh, you all right?
Yeah.
I get reflux. I can only have like one cup of coffee a day now. It
yeah,
sucks.
I just had one.
Getting old sucks. Anyway, let's. I wanted to call out this one. So, Windows Minus says, yeah, the thing about face is bull. The fact that women get less sex in 2021 is completely fake, and they are just able to claim less sex because they have no boyfriend. In 1970, they couldn't lie because they had a boyfriend. But here's the thing about that, Windows. Why lie? who do they have to virtue signal to? Like it's celebrated when when women have more sex now. I had a friend who she's like, yeah, I'm a slut, so what? Like, it's like that's pretty accepted by society. And like what I'm seeing in like my circle, I do see women who have less sex, because it's like First brought this up on his incel manics channel, is like you're when you're overwhelmed by, and studies have shown this, when you have, the more choices you have, the more prone you are to choosing none. That's not how the human brain works. Like, if you were to go to a vending machine and there's like 3 sodas to choose from, you can probably pick your favorite. I don't know, BP 2021. You ever been to like a restaurant and they have like that soda machine where there's like hundreds of different combinations you can make? So you can add like cherry, and you can add it to like this soda. You know the machine I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I see those in like AMC movie theaters all the time.
Right. So like, you ever like just I've used that thing before, and it's like you sit in front of it, and it's like, it's like what? Like, how do I even choose? Like, there's so much choice here. The human brain, when you have that many choices, just shuts down and chooses none sometimes. That's just how it works. Like, the human brain was not made to have that much choice. But that's what we're seeing. It's like you kind of get like overwhelmed and just shut down.
I'm actually gonna make a video about this on my channel in the future. It sort of goes in line with what you're saying. Getting back to Darwin, he made this observation in his research. He referred to it as irrationality in mate selection. He realized that there are a lot of females in all different types of species that make irrational decisions, where they make choices that really don't maximize their fitness, yet he still observes those females making those decisions when they actually mate select. And this has been studied further in contemporary biology. In fact, there was a guy who recently looked at frogs, but that's one example. But this idea of irrationality in mate selection has been observed in many species. And basically, just to give you a real like brief idea, let's say you had a female, right, of a certain species, or let's say you had a bunch of females in a certain species, and those females were given the option of male A and male B. In this first control group, right, this first test, let's say that male B gets 60% of the females and male A gets the 40%. Now, if we take male A and male B, but in the second trial, we add a male C, a third one, what is seen is that in the first test, we saw that male B, the second male, got 60% of the females, right? In the second test, all we did was we added male C. And what is observed is that most of the females will all of a sudden take male A, which makes no sense. And that's known as irrationality in mate selection. And that's been observed many, many times in many species in biology. Did you understand that? I might have not explained it that well.
No, I mean, I think I get the base concept there. Yeah. So it's not always the mate that you would expect them to choose, right? Like the obvious choice.
Yeah,
and like but they can't explain the partner they chose. There was really no common factor to it.
right. The only thing that changed in the second test was you just introduced male C. But male C didn't really play any role. Yet the impact the addition of male C had, it made all of the females change their mind. Instead of picking male B again, they all went to male A, which shows you that there is irrationality in mate selection, and that could certainly. There's no reason why that can't happen with humans. There's no reason why.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree, and but that's I guess that harkens back to the point, is that we don't understand all the factors in attraction, and it's like, we don't really understand, like, like there's so much debate in this community, right? I wanted to talk about a little bit of my I wanted to talk about Pygmy's comment on Face and LMS's stream while we're still on the topic of the all or nothing. So it's like seen as like, subhuman genetics, right? Like, it's possible to have some good traits and some bad traits. So we know that Face in LMS is often applauded for his voice, and yeah, he has a great voice. I mean, shit, I'd hit that. Like, he sounds like freaking Giga Tyrone. And then I think it was this Saturday. I only caught part of his stream, but Pygmy was on there again, and Pygmy goes like, "Oh well, like my voice is all screwed up from being a subhuman with warped vocal cords." So Pygmy is like equating like having a bad voice to like being an incel, and it's like that. Like Face in LMS has a great voice that clearly has nothing to do with it. Like you can have good traits and bad traits the same way you can be really tall with a bad face, or you could have a great face and and be 5'3". Like there's no correlation there. So it's like how did those genes get passed from to the next generation if they were so inferior?
Yeah. I mean that's a good point. I think a lot of I don't know. I get the impression that a lot of guys in the incel sphere, they tend to internalize a lot of things with this all or nothing mentality, and they do tend to conflate a lot of things. In fact, I think that's one of the reasons why it's so difficult to actually have productive intellectual discussions, because you say something and it's like they don't really get the main gist. They hear a buzzword and then their mind fills in the blanks and then they run with a different idea, or they hear one term and then they automatically couple it with something else even though you never intended it to be coupled with, or they don't have the patience to realize that you have independent variables. Not everything has to be inclusive with one another. For instance, like what you just said, it's very possible you could have a good looking person with a bad voice and vice versa. Those two things aren't deadlocked with one another. I see all of these like logical tendencies, which makes it so difficult to have actual like honest and productive discussion.
Right, because it's kind of like some like Face and LMS as you discussed. He comes to a conclusion, with he comes to a conclusion before doing the research, whereas the point is to research and factor in all the factors and then take all the data you have to tell the full story and arrive at the conclusion.
Right.
So, I guess so. So here's what we want to get into is the subjectivity and shifting of goalposts. So when I first appeared in this community, I showed a picture of myself, right, and it was met with, "Oh, it's over for you, man." And I said I'm 5'7" too, right? And everybody's like, "Oh, it's over for you, man. Like, sucks to be you." Like, that typical, what you're always going to hear, right? They're like, "Yeah, you're like a 4 out of 10." I was like, "Oh, okay, man, I'm a 4 out of 10, I guess." And I was like, "Okay, I'm in a relationship right now. I've had plenty. Like it's never really been an issue for me getting a girlfriend. I'm 31 now. I had my first girlfriend when I was 18. It's like, and then they're like, and then all of a sudden everyone's like, actually, you're more like a 6. Yeah, you're like a high tier normie. So it's almost like, like at first everybody, there was like this confirmation bias. Oh, nope, you're ugly. It's over for you. And then like when I tell them like, yeah, that hasn't been really the result, that hasn't been what I've experienced in life. I haven't really experienced any inceldom. And then everybody's like, oh, actually, you're good looking. Never mind. Like actually, you're good looking now. So we don't really take into consideration subjectivity, and that like Face and LMS thinks he's got like the face all mapped out, and there's like a score that we can give a face, whereas like there's a degree of subjectivity, right? Like one person's 5 is another person's 6 or a 4. It's on a sliding scale. There's not like this like hard objective like face rating, right?
Right. It's he wants, again, it's like he wants to take a concept and he wants to draw up like a concrete model. His idea where he could map out this facial economy where he could break the face down into mechanics where he could total up these sums, and then the sums equate to some type of index, and then that index can relay to some corresponding score on the famous 1 to 10 scale, and that basically acts as some numerical value that would symbolize the I guess like genetic potential or quotient of that individual in mate selection. But it's like the amount of intricacy and sophistication you really would need to do that is like so far beyond us. the thing that I wanted to say about the scale, well, actually, to your point, yeah. The thing is, like, the fact that, if you actually do like a blind test where you show your face to people in the incel sphere, and if they rate you a 4 and then you reveal to them you have a girlfriend, then they change their score to a 6, that illustrates that, like, there's something very wrong with their scale. Like, because if you blind them to the fact that you had romantic success, that shows you that, it wasn't your appearance. Your appearance wasn't the fact that they shifted the goalpost. It was because they found out you had actual hard tangible success, which defeats the whole purpose of their scale. And this segues into what I like, my criticism against, well, at least how they use the scale. I feel like, at one point, the idea of a scale, it's not a bad idea. Like, I admit that if we had some way where we could quantify, um, I guess, like, the vanity of a man to get some type of predictive power, that certainly could be useful. Like, that could be like a useful diagnostic tool. But the reason why you would even want to scale in the first place is because we're not always privy to true feedback from women, right? We use a scale because that's our way to emulate what we think women would actually perceive. But the scale should never be more important than what actual women give back as feedback. What women think will always be the most important thing. Like, but I feel like at some point along the line, people have become so obsessed with this usage of a scale where they think their judgment is actually more important than what women think. Like, they've gotten so used to picking apart the face in a specific way, and when they tally up their sums and they get their index, they think that their score they rendered actually has more predictive power than what a guy's tangible, objective feedback from women would be. And that's my main criticism. It's like, if you want to use a scale as like that next best thing, if you want to use a scale because that's sort of like all we have sometimes, fine. But don't think a scale, like your idea of a scale, actually supersedes the true feedback from a woman. It will. That's what you're trying to emulate, but you shouldn't use your scale to substitute for that.
Right, but that bothers me because you have a lot of these like young guys who find this community and they get rated by like these other men or Face and LMS because Face and LMS is supposedly the guru of rating faces. But then it's like when somebody's result is completely different than what he's rated, it's like, how do you explain that? It's like how, like, there's clearly some inconsistency there, and you have like, people take this as gospel. Whereas, like, I can't help but imagining this is my problem with all this, right? Like, you have Face and LMS and Incel TV, they're pushing this narrative, and like these young guys find it, and I can't help but thinking, right? Because like I see guys on Discord, they're like, I'm 16 years old and I'm a virgin and I've never had a girlfriend. It's like, dude, a lot of people I know are like, I have a friend who was 23 for the first time he got laid. Now his body count is like in the 30s. I never got laid till I was 18. Like, that's pretty normal, bro. Like, it's like, but I can't help but thinking, what if I, come across this when I was like, 15, 16 years old, right? I mean, I'm a pretty short guy. I would have probably fucked my life up because, this sounds so convincing. And it sounds like it sounds like science, right? It sounds like, oh, this is irrefutable. I'm wondering if like I would have been like, no, I'm not gonna gym max. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna like hang out. I'm not gonna, build a social circle. I'm just gonna lay in my room and rot. If my life would have gone entirely differently for the worst had I found this. And that's what I feel is the problem, is that Face and LMS, it's not the message is just like, don't try, it's over for you. But a lot of people, like, because people thought, when I first showed myself, they're like, oh yeah, you're an incel, bro. But clearly it hasn't been that experience. Like, if I'd found this would have fucked me up pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, there is that unfortunate reality. Like, some of this stuff, some of this stuff is very hard hitting, and if it catches a guy who's at that point where, I don't know, maybe at that point in his life he's just not built to have to take on some of these things, especially when, like you said, I mean, I think Face does go out of his way to definitely over exaggerate a lot of things. That could be for entertainment value. That could be even because, in some unfortunate manner, he gets some type of enjoyment out of it. I mean, we've discussed it. I do think there's a lot of Schadenfreude. There's also a lot of misery-loving company. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if Incel TV and Face and LMS intentionally, turn they turn the knob up a little bit just to amp up the intensity of certain notions, just for the sake of shock value and for the sake of emphasis. But
And theater.
right? Yeah, exactly. Theater, theatrics for sure. But like that's the package that they've put together, and I think it unfortunately can catch some guys, perhaps the ones that are more vulnerable, at least at that point, in their life. It could catch them a little more off guard.
It's like Lloyd says. It's kind of like Tom Brady's combine. You do everything to try to say he can't be successful, but lo and behold, he's the greatest of all time. Yeah, and he says you can't measure everything. That is actually a really good analogy. A really good analogy. So Tom Brady never had any eye popping stats in the combine, and Lloyd, I hope you'll come on the show and actually because you probably know this better than I do, but I believe wasn't Tom Brady one of the last draft picks when he was drafted? If
Are you talking to me or someone else?
Yeah, maybe wasn't Tom Brady one of the last draft picks when he was drafted in the early I think he was drafted in 99 or 2000. But I know he wasn't this eye popping star, right? Nobody he didn't have a great 40-yard dash. He couldn't he could only bench press 225 a handful of times. He's not even there's a picture of him now where he's not even ripped. He doesn't even have abs or anything. He's not mind-blowingly fast. He's not mind-blowingly strong, but yet he's the greatest quarterback of all time. He gets the ball where it needs to be. He hits that open receiver. He's just smart. He doesn't need overwhelming athletic prowess to win football games. Somehow you can't explain it, but he gets the ball where it needs to go.
Yeah, he has he has tremendous football IQ and vision.
Right. Whereas if you picked him, in high school, he wasn't even really a superstar, and in college, he wasn't even really a superstar. He just learned the game inside and out, and knows. Tom Brady doesn't beat you with these 50-yard Hail Mary passes. He beats you with one 10-yard first down at a time. That's how he wins games. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. RMR, Tom Brady was drafted last. Yep. I knew he was a last round draft pick back in 99 or 2000, but yeah. So that's the point, is that there's these factors that we're just not taking into consideration, and it's just so much more nuanced. But so I posed this experiment in my last stream. So the people who listen to this, this is gonna be a little repetitive, but this is a good one, right? This should illustrate something like lookism, for example, right? Let's say that you're a Chad and you can you have access to plenty of women. Women find you attractive for the most part, right? And you are the last man in the world. There's 5 women, and I already know, and everybody's gonna say, oh, well, you could just screw all of them because you're Chad. Well, for this thought experiment, they are armed with a gun. They will kill you if you cheat, so you can only choose one. Now, the one woman is gorgeous, perfect, 10 out of 10, blonde, bombshell, long legs, great butt, great breasts, just gorgeous, beyond a supermodel, right? The rest are all just plain Jane, kind of average looking women. Now, the caveat is that the really hot woman has a horrible, grating, annoying voice. Picture Fran Drescher on steroids, right? More high pitched, more nasally, oh, Mr. Sheffield, like that, right? And you can only choose one. Be honest with yourself. Who are you going to pick? An average looking woman or that girl?
Right. We talked about this earlier. I got to tell you, I wouldn't be surprised at all if a lot of people that identify with incels would take the good-looking one with the bad voice.
But in a way, right? Because I certainly know I wouldn't, and a lot of people, given the choice, I don't think would. So it's like, and First is trying to come on the show, so I'm going to add him in.
Okay, but
Hey, First. All right. Well, we'll let him get his bearings while we finish the thought experiment.
Okay, wait, but could I just ask you a question on that? What do you think though? Like most incels would say though. I'm curious to know like what you think they would say.
I think that they would be, and I think there are some people who could generally deal with with a terrible voice just to date someone who's really attractive. But I think some people would say, yeah, I'd go with the really hot girl. But like, if we're being honest with ourselves, I think most people would take somebody average over somebody really attractive with a horrible voice. So.
Right.
Which Windows Minus is saying, yeah, but in nature this doesn't happen, so why bother? I mean, like, I don't know, Fran Drescher was considered attractive in the 90s, right? I mean, that's why she was a young actress, but she's also known for having an incredibly fucking annoying voice, so. The voice pill is brutal. Look at Barry White. I mean, he's got a great voice. Like, I'm sure, how many women do you think pleasured themselves to the sound of his voice? Barry White, you reckon?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Actually, I really have no idea. Was Barry White the guy you were telling me? He's the guy. He's like the very smooth talking, like suave guy.
Yeah, he made like a bunch of like songs that are like played like in pornos in like the 70s, but he has songs like called like Let's Get It On. But yeah, he's got like this like very like large black man voice, like, hey, baby.
Yeah, well, I mean, I could say in general, I know that voice is something that has been studied a lot by biologists. It absolutely plays a role when it comes to attraction in the eyes of women.
Right, but that's something when you have like the locusts harping on about the bone structure, they don't take that into consideration. That like a voice, right, makes a lot of perception about you.
Right. I mean, yeah, that's something that, yeah, but it's like I understand why they do that because it's like when it comes to lookism, see, we don't deny lookism, and we know that when it comes to a woman qualifying a guy's face, that happens in like 2 seconds. And she could do that from 10 feet away. She doesn't have to even be talking to the guy. So it's like if the guy doesn't hit that initial threshold, then he never gets an opportunity to really even demonstrate other traits about him. I think like that's one of the main reasons as to why they're so fixated on lookism. It's because in a lot of ways in real social settings, that facial qualification that has to occur, that's like the very first barrier. So it's like if you think that's your holdup, then it almost is like, why even give any thought to all of these additional facets.
Let's just read this comment. Yeah, but transcend to attraction, I would choose the hot one. If she speaks too much, I would just beat her up and tell her to shut the fuck up. Happy International Women's Day to you too, Windows Minus. Anyway, let's continue. So I don't know. We are going on a little long here. We're at about an hour and 20 minutes in. Do you want to go to callers? Do you want to bring people on?
Oh, this is your show. I'm good with whatever you want to do, man.
All right. Well, I think. Well, before we do that, actually, are there any points you wanted to raise? And I think we'll go to callers.
Yeah, this is the last point I wanted to raise. Just getting back to Charles Darwin and Darwinian biology, because I know a lot of incels like to dip into this. There was a caller, and this isn't a personal attack against him, but he raised a very interesting idea. And, he's been a guy who's been vocal in the sense, he's been, and perhaps understandably so. He's expressed that he's become more resentful towards women over recent years because of how they've treated him and perhaps how they've treated a lot of men in the West, as we all know. The thing he said, though, that I found, interesting, I'll say, is that he said if we're looking at, our life through an evolutionary lens, through an evolutionary biology lens, the fact that women aren't dating him or giving him a chance, he said that these women are denying him his right to procreate. These women are denying his right to his biological imperative, which is to pass on his genes and give rise to offspring. That was what he said. The thing that I found a little interesting, though, is if you want to cite evolutionary biology, you realize what you're doing is you're talking about the operative word, which is evolution. And evolution refers to the changing of genes over time. It's how genetics change over time. And the only way you get that change over time is through some type of selection, which means that unfortunately, not everyone can participate, whether it be in humans or the animal kingdom. In the most Darwinian sense, you have to acknowledge there are unfortunately going to be winners and losers, because if every single organism in a species participated equally with congruency, you wouldn't have any change, because you'd have all of the genes would just be held constant. You'd have no change, no delta, thus no evolution. The only way you get evolution is by having oscillations, undulations. You have to have trends, you have to have skews, which means unfortunately there are going to be winners and there are going to be losers. You don't have a right to procreate. What you do have a right to is you have the right to compete. That's what Darwin would tell you face to face. You don't have a right to procreate or to get a biological imperative. You have the right to compete for your biological imperative. And that's as Darwinian as it gets. And if you can't accept that, then you're not really black-pilled. And I'll leave it at that, and you could continue.
Okay, I said if anyone wants to come on, we'll take a few guests here, and yes, so Lloyd will be joining us momentarily. I'll bring you on. I think you have a response to your statement there, BP21. Recessed Bone says, "Soy, I'm entitled to fuck. I'm entitled to sex." So, I guess that message wasn't well received.
Well, that's fine, but that's just, I don't know. I mean, look, people can think and say whatever they want to, but that's just not someone who's staying faithful to Darwinian biology.
Right. So that I guess recessed phones. Then you would say that you don't agree with Darwin then. But anyway, let's go to our caller. And R. Marjadavra says, "I like this BP 2021 guy." So R. Marjadavra, big fan. All right, let's go to our guest. Mi hermano está aquí. ¿Cómo estás?
Yeah, what's up?
Yo, so clean any good poop tonight?
Playing what?
Clean any good poop tonight?
Nah, I'm not working. You think I would be calling in this if I was working?
Hey, it beats cleaning poop. But anyway, welcome.
I was just gonna be quick. My only my Tom Brady thing. As I hate Tom Brady, but I think the analogy does fit for what with what you're talking about. Given the where he was drafted, what people were saying about him, like I think it relates to that community pretty well. Like if he just said no, I'm gonna pack it in, he wouldn't have 7 Super Bowls. You factor, more, like I think a lot of what gets missed here too is a lot of the like people who are in relationships and stuff like that. The biggest predetermining factor for those relationships is their social circles. It's not necessarily, what dating apps you're using. It's the friends that you have and the people that you know.
So that's a theory that first from incel medics often brings up it's the social circle theory. And he's saying that like a average 5 out of 10 guy in a social circle is better off than like a 7 out of 10 guy on a dating app. So from your experience, from what you've seen, how realistic is that statement?
So I think that's definitely realistic. I mean, like my teammates, a lot of my teammates in college, because they married people who are on the women's team, or they dated, like, I think at least 3 people on my 20-person track team married people like on the other side. in
So
nursing
they-
school, people, the male, like the male nurses, a lot of them dated the female nurses. It's just, like you're not gonna find I don't think you're gonna find these like evolutionary or things that you can generalize to the general public off of Tinder and OkCupid, because there's this, because maybe yes, like I think that I agree with what they're saying, where like, they're gonna have a lot more women are gonna have a lot more swipes and stuff like that, sure, and a lot more selection. But you got to factor who's going to use those apps. Are they actually? They're not looking on those apps for serious dating. Like most people are going on those because they're just bored and don't have anything to do.
right, and that BP 2021, and that's kind of in line with what you were saying, how it's a different type of person who would be using Tinder.
Yeah. If you look at the analytics of like the actual profiles of these people, it definitely paints a very specific type of portrait. Like you definitely have a specific type of sample that you're working with on those online dating sites.
Because like they're gonna look for more superficial things than someone you might come across in your career, or if you're just whatever hobbies you do outside of things. It's not
right.
You brought up a good point about the track thing. You know what? I didn't even think of this. When I was in high school, you're right. It was always the guys on the track team were all dating like the girls' track team.
Because that's your social circle. That's who you're taking the bus with to a meet. That's who you have common interests with. They've done studies in colleges, and this might have been pre-Tinder. I'm not sure. It was back when I took a social psychology class, so it was years ago, and I could not find the study if you asked me. So, but the biggest determining factor in college of people like dating other people, it wasn't attractiveness or anything like that. It was actually proximity, like dorms wise, like a male dorm to like female dorms.
Do you remember in my senior year on my team, right? There was a really good runner. Let's not dox it. Let's call him Ronnie Ballfield. Okay, I think you know who I'm talking about,
right?
I know
who you're talking about, sure.
Yeah, Ronnie was probably about, what do you think he was, like 5'6", maybe, and like 120 pounds.
Yeah,
but he was pretty good at the sport. I mean, you should see who he's married to now. It was some runner he went to college with, but she's like a bombshell. So like by this Blackpill theory, like, okay, maybe he doesn't have great bone structure because he's short, but he mogged everybody at running. I mean, I think Ronnie ran like a 4:20 something mile in high school. Like he was, one of the best in the sport, in our school.
I just think like it really all depends on, the people you have around you and how they're going to hype you up or hype you down. And it just seems like a lot of these people are just trying to like hype each other down, and then you get that. You're not going to get that. No one's going to go on Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, all these things and get like positive reinforcement. It doesn't matter who you are.
Well, it's here's the thing too. A lot of it boils down to ego. You choose to take the reinforcement negatively. Not everybody has thick skin, right? Like obviously, I'm a 5'7" guy. As you know, the person I'm dating is 5'10". Cool. She didn't have a problem with it. Have I been rejected for my height before? Sure. Do I take it personally at this point? No. Like that's like that. Basically, what you're saying is like your ego can't take it. You can't handle that rejection. And BP 2021, I believe you were the one making the point where you were saying like a lot of these guys are behaving like women. They're behaving more feminine, in a more feminine manner.
Oh, in regard to how like Face and LMS, a lot of incels will tote this argument how men are the logical ones, men are the rational ones, and women are the emotional ones, yet they display those characteristics themselves to commit to their own beliefs. Was that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
My other only thing I was like that I overheard that just doesn't make sense to me, and maybe, I mean, you guys probably have a way better understanding of the study than I do. Someone said something about an OkCupid study. If they only rated 20% of people as being average, that doesn't make sense. Like how are 80% of people below average? Because then the average would have to be something different. Like it's a bell curve. Like how you can't have only.
Well, what the point that they're trying to make is that women's perception of average is warped right now.
Yeah, but
you know,
like are only 20% of people getting married? Are only 20% of people dating? Like that just doesn't make sense. Like look outside.
Right. Well, my point is that data was broken because we know that there was 14 million participants, but we also know that dating sites are comprised of roughly 80% men and 20% women. So you're comparing the behavior of 2 to 3 million women to the rating behavior of 10 to 11 million men and saying that you're getting the same result. You can't draw that comparison. That's like if I go up to 100 people, on the street, right? And I ask, hey, do you like pizza? Right. And they're like, and it's a roughly 50-50, let's just say, right? And I'm like, okay, and I break it down by, by race, by gender, right? And then I do another experiment where I find 10 black guys and, hey, do you like pizza? And 7 of them say no. And then I go and publish it. And it's like, would you believe that 70% of African American males don't like pizza? That's the point I'm trying to make. That would be similar to doing that.
And I'll just end with this. I think this is probably the best guest that you've had on, the most objective. It's all numbers, and it seems, I think I would agree with pretty much everything he was saying. So
cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna dip. I'll let you take some other people. Probably we'll go the other way. So.
All right. Thanks for your call, man.
Yeah, man. Have a good night. Oh, right. I just wanted to mention one thing because I think First would want us to mention it. What your previous caller was referring to, or it could be part of it. Are you familiar with the term propinquity?
Propinquity? No, I'm not. So educate me.
Oh yeah, propinquity, which it's like in social psychology, it refers to this dynamic where the state of being close to someone, or someone's proximity, it increases your affinity to that. So the more you're around someone, the more your affinity will tend to scale in favor of it. So you could find examples of that all the time in social circles, because the more you have some regularity with being in proximity of people, the more likely you are to liking them as well as they are to liking you, which is a phenomenon that's observed in social psychology known as propinquity.
Okay, yeah, so actually thanks for calling that out. I didn't know the actual sociological term for it, but yeah, First had talked about that several times, how the more familiar you become with somebody, the more prone you are to liking that person. Yep. So good stuff. All right, let's bring on Maramy Jeeks. I know he's been waiting to come on. I think maybe we'll have him and then maybe one more caller because we are running a little late here, and I do want to keep this under 2 hours. So let's bring on Maramy Jeeks. Maramy Jeeks, you're on the show.
Hi. Actually, I'm glad you brought up that last point, propinquity. So what First actually talked about more recently is that essentially women have so many options nowadays, they get to choose who gets to hang out with them, right? And they're not choosing guys like me. I mean, they refuse to even talk to me. I don't talk to any female. They refuse to talk to me. They refuse to interact with me. I'm almost 20. I did track in high school. They refused to talk to me. Their rights are just so strong that the Jays gave them, and they refuse to talk to me because I'm not good looking. So I agree with all this social circle stuff, but the Jays give them such strong rights. They exclusively associate with attractive males nowadays, and that's not me. However, I do agree with Blackpill 2021 about how females aren't selecting for the objectively best genes. I think this is mostly sociological. I'm noticing these females, they're on there all the time these days. I'm in college, and even if there's a chat next to them, they'll still be on their phone, or a chat they'll still be on their phone. So I think like let's be real, like they're not like Googling things about like physics or biology. They're just looking at chads on the phone. And
Wait, can I ask you a
yeah,
question?
yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm just curious. Are you seeing the same thing with your friends also, where like your friends also won't even
Oh, I
get to
got
have
a good one.
social
I
circles?
got a good one here, man. I have a 6'1", white, blonde hair, blue-eyed, Chad-like friend, and I was hanging out with him this Friday night, and he was like, I'm getting used to being single. Like I've accepted it. And this guy was not an incel by any stretch of the imagination or any stretch of Face LMS's imagination. And I heard him say that, and I didn't know what to say. I was like, wow. Women are really just going crazy. Because 2 out of 10 women has a boyfriend, and this guy doesn't have a girlfriend. Like, women are going nuts. Like, this is ridiculous.
And that's like around like the age range. Would that? Are you talking like early 20s or something like that?
Yeah, 1920.
Okay, yeah, that's no joke. I mean, I don't doubt it.
No, it's no joke, dude. Like, the social circle's gone. I mean, like, this is the time to do women. I mean, like, this is like they have their biological accountability is gone. They have birth control, they have abortion on demand. So they don't have that biological accountability anymore. So they get pregnant. It's like, oh, I abort, tee-hee. They're given like favorable position jobs. They have more motivation because they have sex lives and social lives. I don't. Yeah, like this is really like the time to be a woman and not the time to be, a man for the most part, unless you're exceptionally attractive, or women consider you exceptionally attractive. I mean, it's women in control. The Jays, I'd say Jays, they really love women, man, and the women don't love them back. They don't love me back, and yeah, this is bad. I don't know.
Yeah.
So they don't. Oh no, you go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say. I think this is what first wanted to segue into like the future of what this is going to lead towards. Yeah, I mean, I don't deny anything you're saying. Like this is everything that is in line with what I've been hearing about. But the thing that I will say though, I mean, it is perplexing to me though because like I'm guessing you live in the U.S., right? I live in New Jersey. You
Yeah,
don't have to say the state, but you live in the U.S., right? Okay, yeah. So,
I do,
so then,
yeah.
yeah. So then, you're familiar though. Like, there still are like certain enclaves, right? Certain communities that haven't been hit nearly as hard as as other places have.
I think every white community's been hit, even rednecks. I saw someone from like a real rural place out in the country on that chat, and it was a obese female who was dating like a Chad light or Chad, and they were dating. So I think it hit the white community like everywhere.
Right.
It's over white cells. I don't know about Hispanics. I don't. Where I grew up, there really aren't very many of them. I don't have interactions with them, really at all. But I've heard like women don't really have such strong rights in that community. I think like they still worship God. Catholicism's real. They don't worship women like people do. They still worship God and Jesus, not women. Yeah, but I don't know. Hopefully they'll when their numbers grow, hopefully their values are good, and I don't know. The remaining white women will just have to suck it up. I mean, don't be racist, right?
Yeah, I mean, like what you say, it raises like like these ongoing questions because, and that's I feel like at the crux, that's what like we're still trying to grapple with. Like there's this push and pull, like tug of war between like biology and sociology, and I think like the early pioneers of this incel sphere, they really laid into a lot of these biological ideas, and it's not to write all of them off, but I think a lot of them have been over exaggerated, and they've neglected a lot of other facets that exist in the human
I
experience.
agree.
And
I
so,
agree. I mean,
right,
lookism is real, but I think it's sociological. I mean, if it was biological, then it would have existed forever. I mean,
right,
there's
exactly.
so many things about modern society that aren't natural, like birth control, abortions, all these like make work jobs that females get, OnlyFans, police protection. I mean, like in the caveman days, if a woman was wearing nothing, like she'd just get raped. Like she wasn't like protected, you know?
Right, yeah.
All right, Meremy, any final points?
I see you got first on, so thanks for having me. Hopefully my mic wasn't too bad. Yeah, and I agree with all this sociology stuff, and I just like social circle like that. Like Jay gave women such strong rights that it's no longer viable. So, thank you. I look forward to hearing first.
All right, Meremy, thanks for your call. All right, so I see First has joined us. First, how's your connection, man?
You tell me how am I going?
You're coming through clear, but you sound a little hoarse there. You all right?
Yeah, so I missed like 1 hour of the show, right?
Yeah, you missed like the first actual hour and 40 minutes. So we actually talked about a number of the topics that I said we were going to go into tonight, such as the sociological. I mean, it's kind of hard to do a recap now, so I don't know if you did you catch any of it?
I did not, but I know you guys' content, so I could guess what it was really about. Did you ever drop the Hispanic pill?
No, we didn't. We didn't get into that yet. So I'm curious if you want to elaborate on that and see what BP 2021 thinks of that one.
Well, you
Are
could
you
tell me,
familiar
I
with
guess,
this
and then
goal?
I'll let.
BP 2021. Have you heard about the Hispanic pill?
I might have. I'm not. Maybe you're referring to something else. I mean, I'm familiar with how they've been, especially in the West. It's like community-wise, culture-wise. They've been able to retain a lot of success when it comes to pair bonding, and having familial ties, do a lot of work, do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to giving rise to relationships, which other communities they don't really have anymore. But maybe you're referring to something else.
Right. Well, no, that's exactly it. Um, um, Hispanics represent an underwhelming number in the in these incel spheres, right? Like it's a very small number comparatively that we've seen versus every other ethnicity. So it makes you wonder like what's going on differently with them. And first, and I see it all the time, where like you go out and you just see these like Hispanic guys who like there's nothing special looking about them, like they're average. A lot are even short. And they've had no problems with like getting a girlfriend, getting a wife, having kids, like having a normal experience. So it's like why, if this is so biological, why does a certain ethnicity seem to be less impacted than other ethnicities? What sense would that make?
Yeah, that's a very fair question.
Yeah, it's a subject that only Americans seem to really grasp because I mean, a place where face LMS would be London, UK, does not have a sizable population of them, at least not straight from Mexico or Central America. And every corner. I mean, me and Jay are from opposite sides of the country, and we see the same thing. I've growing up in California, that's what I've noticed the most is that they seem to be immune from the standards that white men or some Asian men like they fall into, or black men too. It seems the pair bonding is so strong, and the Hispanics they prioritize social connections and romantic connections over materialism and academia, and there's a strong matchmaking culture that exists that does not exist for example, whites that are very atomized. So that's another factor going for them. And I can get into the details of the matchmaking culture because I've been around it. Personally, I witnessed it, how these people pair up.
Yeah, so that's actually, and I see this in real time too. So BP 2021, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I live in the neck of the woods that you do, basically in the East
Right.
Coast. When I grew up, I mean, I've been very accustomed to seeing a lot of Spanish-speaking individuals, even to go that far. But I've seen many Mexican Americans, many Hispanic Americans, all over New Jersey and New York, even on Long Island when I ventured out there, which is pretty much the same makeup. So, I mean, everything that I've seen in those communities, it's pretty much the same. Actually, I'd even go as far in saying that the cultural ties in some of these communities in the tri-state area, it's so strong that if if you're in some of their neighborhoods, they speak in Spanish. It's not like they're going to be speaking in English. They're going to be speaking in Spanish.
Dude, this is New York. Aquí necesita hablar español. It's necesario para
Right.
vivir aquí.
Right.
Like you gotta learn Spanish here on the East Coast, at least somewhat. Like,
Right. Which again, it shows you how how like their preferential tie to like their like almost like their, I don't know, like their nationalism or at least their ethnicity, right? It still remains very strong, and it gets reflected in how they, value based wise live out their lives.
yeah. So if this really were a biological issue, and do we have to go into like Mamoon and like count, if we were to ask everybody to, self-identify their ethnicity, what ethnicity do you think we're going to find the least amount of?
So there's somebody that named Mercer in our Discord that posted. So there's like sexual counts by partner count and like frequency, and he showed that Hispanics had the lowest occurrence of zero frequency or no sexual activity for the males, and then Mexican was one of the most understated, or Hispanic was one of the most understated things in the incel count when they did it for incels.co. So those are two numeric samples we have.
Right.
So
and
if somebody were to ask me if I have statistics on this, I do, but they are sample sized.
But if you were to take that, an average looking Hispanic guy and put him on Tinder to do Chad fishing, what would happen?
I don't think it'd fare well. That's the thing. I mean,
right.
Again,
So
you're using a very perverse mechanism.
This should show you that that context is everything here. Because if you put, I agree, you put that same guy who has no problem in real life, right? He has no problem. He's got a big social circle. He's got a job and everything. He's good to go, right? He's got 20 cousins he can rely on. He knows somebody in every trade. He's got the complete hookup. You put him on Tinder, okay, nothing, crickets. But in his social circle, he's fine. Like, like say something doesn't work out with his girl, he's got plenty of other options. This just shows you how different real life is from that.
Yeah, real life isn't Tinder. I mean, anybody who says that is very deeply deluded just by the numbers. So, and most people don't participate in that market, and that market's very skewed. So, unfortunately, this community, because of the autism, because of the social isolation, because of the atomization, they don't understand anything but online. And most people do not pair off of online. Having done the research on this to make a whole documentary on online dating, it's a non-factor. And I think Zoomers are even moving away from it. From the what I see coming out now, I think it was just a fad for millennials and gained too much infamy in the public sphere to kind of continue generating a good portion of the population to go on there. And for guys, they could only operate in the online world, and they don't realize what's going on offline. And it actually takes some effort if you're not naturally pushed into these circles to get into these circles. Like I wasn't born Hispanic, but I eventually, went to these social circles through school, through work, and I saw how this occurred. That doesn't occur much in the white community anymore, and that's why whites are very overrepresented, even by proportionally to the U.S. population, on online dating, because they're very atomized. They move across the nation away from their families to go to a marginally better college. They're very split off, unlike the multi-generational housing that Hispanics stick to.
Right, and that should show you that's a sociological shift. That has nothing to do with biology. That's just two, ethnicities of people that the culture is having an impact on the mate selection.
Jay, did you get that picture I just sent you on Discord?
Let me take a look. I actually have not been monitoring. I'm not as sophisticated. See, this is the thing, right? I'm just not as sophisticated or as savvy as Face and LMS at this streaming stuff. But yeah, let me see what you just sent me right here. Okay, it looks like it's a couple like at the mall, I would assume.
Yeah. So I was at a mall in New York this past weekend. I usually go to the mall either to hang out with people that I know in real life, and whenever I see like a couple that I'm sort of shocked by when I listen to a lot of the incel sphere based discussion, I try to like get either a video clip or a picture. And so that couple I just saw, and I don't know, maybe if you're able to share that with the viewers, they might be interested to see. But to do my best to describe it, you would say they're basically like they're height matched, right?
Yeah, the guy is barely taller than the girl. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was two Hispanics. It was a young man and a young woman, and I see this type of pairing like all over.
All the time. All
the time. Yeah. This is a typical pairing.
This is the most common pairing. This is the most common pairing. White people are barely paired up. I mean, whites have become an autistic, kind of like a sub race, honestly, in the social scene that I have to call out for now on. You know what's funny is that we had a user called Pareto Man, and he's in Scotland. They have a sizable Hispanic population, but he saw a 5'5" Pakistani man with a 5'5" Hispanic Pakistani woman at a golf driving range, and they're the only ones like recently to like reach out to him socially, to offer his number, to kind of have him as a friend in real life. And he saw how much different it was to his native population of Scots. And it's funny. We're halfway across the country. I mean, we're all the way across the globe, but we're seeing the same thing. We're just different brown people. The brown people can socialize much better than the whites.
Speaking of Mercer, he's trying to come on the show, so I'm gonna add him. And BP, I've got your picture here, but Mercer, welcome to the show.
Hey, I wasn't even realizing that this was a live stream. So what's going on, guys?
Hey, not much, man. We're just
let me know if there's a lot of echo, because for some reason this is not going through my headphones. I'm on my phone right now, but for some reason it's playing through the speakers.
I don't hear any echo. Do you guys?
No, it sounds good to me.
Okay, cool. So are we talking about Mexicans or Hispanics? Because I can tell you that when I was looking up that demographics of inceldom, it's pretty obvious what's going on there. You got like Mexicans have the lowest rate, and then Hispanic women have the highest rate of no sex reported in the last year, other than I believe Asian women. So I mean, it's pretty obvious what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, it really can't be denied. But somehow, like when we post this, we're going to be told that we're coping, and they just want white Chad. Like,
no, dude, it's dude. These 5'7", these 5'7" Hispanics for some reason are doing a lot better than we are. But it must be some other explanation, right? Like, it can't be that maybe they just have a better social structure in place that allows them to pair up far more easily, maybe, because I can tell you personally, when I've gone through my mother's scrapbook, I mean, I don't know my father's because they didn't really take photos back then, but my mother grew up in the 80s and she did take photos. And I can tell you that just going through the scrapbook of the photos of what she had, the people there were not top tier looking people. They were very average, mediocre looking people on average. Like that was what you saw. You know, it wasn't even both men and women. This is something I've made a point about, is that even women have become, like, the hypergamy has affected men the most. We see it the most with men, but with women it has also had an effect, is that women, both women and men, have become more attractive in order to compete. It's almost like a race to the bottom, or a race to the top, I suppose you could say.
Yeah, what was it? The zero-sum game, you could say. But I just lost my track of thought. God, I'm such a boomer.
Yeah, Mercer. So I was referencing, you posted an incel data on our Mablu network. You posted about Hispanic men reporting like the lowest occurrence of inceldom. You know, so we have a data set to actually represent this. You know, for the first time since you posted that. There was two different studies. There was a health study I think done by the government, and it showed Hispanics being the lowest, and then specifically Mexican being very low on the occurrence of inceldom. And then there was a study of incels.co, like a census, and it showed Hispanics are also the lowest represented there.
What do you guys think about all this K-pop maxing stuff?
Yeah, well, hang on. Before we get on to K-pop maxing, just to make a point about the Hispanic thing, the Mexican thing, you have to keep in mind this coincides with other data that we found that shows that the intermarriage rate is equal for both men and women. So it's not like these Hispanic men, these Hispanic like manlets, are just slaying across the entire United States and just wrecking all these white women and leaving all these white men in tears, right? Like that's not what's happening, right? What I think is happening is what I've said in my video when I made that video, is that if you compare the population pyramid, sorry about that. If you compare the population pyramid of Hispanics versus whites, there's just far more younger people in the Hispanic pool. And in fact, just out of curiosity, I did a comparison where I enlarged or shrunk the white population pyramid compared to the Hispanics based on the proportion of their population. And if you look at the youngest population, like we're talking like 0 to 15, they're almost equal with young whites now. And like that's how significant the demographic change is. And I think this is what's allowing the Mexicans specifically, but well, Hispanics in general. The thing is, like 2/3 of self-described Hispanics in the United States are Mexican, anyways, right? So I mean, you might as well just equivalent Hispanic to Mexican in the United States for the most part. You know, Cubans and also
huge country that we're right on the border. I mean, yeah, that would stand to reason, of course.
Yeah, and also you have to keep in mind, right? So you have like maybe Guatemalans and stuff and Ecuadorians who might have issues, but then on the other hand, you also have Cubans who are basically assimilated into the white population, and there are also a lot of there are also a lot of people that would identify as white Hispanics, who are most likely like assimilated Hispanics who are second or third generation, who probably are in as fucked up a situation as typical. Well, like look at Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes is basically a white Hispanic. That's what he is,
yeah,
right? That's what ends up happening to these guys. Yeah, once they lose their original identity, they end up trying to sort of assimilate into this generic white identity. Yeah, especially
they become
if they're
the most
mixed.
white nationalist people. They become the largest white nationalist supporters, which is funny.
Yeah, that's the big joke about the whole Amerimut thing, right? Is that they're all mixed up and they're all but that's a big thing. As far as the K-pop goes, I can tell you that at least as far as Latin America goes, I've known Brazilian girls who were rather pretty. Like I would consider them attractive, and they were looking for Korean men specifically. Though on the other hand, I will say this is the phenotypical stereotype that is portrayed by K-pop is extremely far apart from what the average Korean actually looks like. Like I've known a number of Koreans; they look nothing like the K-pop stereotype.
Right, you're right, of course.
Completely different. Like even farther apart than like what the average white guy looks like compared to Brad Pitt. Like the difference is almost like a racial difference. Like the average Korean is actually fairly yellowish and like brown in terms of their phenotype, in terms of their color, and they look very similar to other East Asian people. Like they're not very tall. Like they're about 5'8" on average. I mean, they're taller than the average East Asian, but only by about an inch or so. They're not especially tall, and they're not especially gracile looking. Like they're not all that thin. They're actually on the chubby side compared to other East Asians. So I will say that. And if you look at plastic surgery in South Korea, that's one of the biggest industries there. And one of the number one things they do in South Korea is shave the jawlines of both men and women. They will actually shave the jawlines to make them look more less masculine, I suppose you could say. Though it's not really an act.
RMR says K-pop guys are also super tall for their phenotype.
Yeah, they're much taller than what is typical, right? Like they're like 5'11", 6 foot.
But on the point of the people who like to say, oh, JBW is law, JBW is law. It's like still though, like they still have typical Asian features. It's like, how would you explain this phenomenon?
Yeah, well, I can't speak specifically for Asian features. I mean, I've known Koreans that are in Korea. I used to play Gary's Mod on a Korean server, and I befriended a lot of Koreans through it. And I would talk to them a lot. Like I would say, Korea is like the ultimate nihilist sort of end game to where we're headed, because like the ubiquity of plastic surgery and the sort of extreme amount of false. I don't know. Sorry if you guys could hear the updates there. The ubiquity of like false stereotypes of how people should look. Like I remember when I was talking to this Korean girl once, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm not. I'm like 5'8", and she was like, "What? I thought that all white people were over 6 feet tall." I was like, "No." Yeah, a lot of us are, but not all of us. And she was completely dumbfounded that was not a completely accurate stereotype. It's like South Korea is like the capital for stereotypes.
No wonder there's a white halo. No wonder there's a white halo for these people. If they think that, no wonder there's a white halo.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I had to correct her. I'm like, sorry, but not every single European ethnic group is 6 foot. Now there are a lot of them that are, but it's not all of us, right? But and I don't think it's.
I think we lost Mercer. Hello.
Yeah, StreamYard just sucks ass.
Yeah, they're the number one. They're the number one in the world, I think, when it comes to false expectations, when it comes to physical appearance, especially, and also monetary. When it comes to income, right? Like God bless these guys.
Explains the low birth rate.
I can't think of a country other than maybe China. I can't think of a country that's been more ruthlessly, run through the ringer to rush themselves to first world status. I can't think of another country that has been more brutally worked than Korea. And you look at what's come about. I mean, they're kind of like they have this cultural flourishing that's happening among the sort of the decadent West and the decadent East. But it's like, there's been like 50 years of Korean men that have sacrificed their lives to bring their country into the first world. And this is the result, It's pretty tragic in a lot of ways.
Yeah, they really have modeled their whole cultural philosophy after the United States specifically. And they really have done a very good job at achieving just that. They've accelerated themselves to this state of almost like entering like this this decadent, almost like postmodern state where they've taken their cues from America, but they've like dialed up the knob to that next level of intensity, and that definitely is what's going on there.
Yeah, that's the problem, is that East Asian people in particular have taken the American sort of materialistic capitalism, and they've cranked it up to the next level to such an extent that they're destroying their own populations through overproductivity. Like, this is something I noticed with the Japanese is, like, you have this enormous metropolis that the Japanese have produced, like, where there's, you know, this beautiful country that is, you have all these skyscrapers everywhere. You have all this massive overproduction. The entire world has just been inundated with Japanese products, like Nintendo. I don't even have to say, you know, Nintendo, Sony, Kawasaki, Mitsubishi.
Toyota, Honda, yeah, it's
Yeah,
all.
I don't even have to say, like, we all know, like all the things the Japanese have produced, but at what cost? There are no young Japanese left to enjoy the excess productivity that they've created through
right.
the enormous sacrifice that they've engaged in, because they've worked so hard that they've lost every other part of their culture that was not tied to productivity. Their
Right, and
entire culture was like hyper focused towards productivity to such an extent that they've lost every other aspect of it. And you see
Well,
the same thing with Koreans.
their age pyramid is completely flipped upside down. They have almost no youth there, and they're going to be in real trouble when this next generation reaches retirement age or dies off. They're going to have a serious labor force problem. And there was a saying, but we can see that was culturally impacted. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but there was a saying in like the 80s, right? That Japanese businessmen live in the office and commute to home. It was just and it was entirely work focused culture where, you know, everybody was like, okay, like people, both men and women were putting off, you know, having families to go to work and focus on their career. And then the birth rates declined. And now they're in the situation where they're in now. There's not, most people in Japan are boomers. They don't really have a lot of youth.
Yeah, and guess what? Guess what? If you look at boomers and if you look at old people, they're not they're not interested in taking risks. They're not going to spend money on things that could potentially not work out for them. Whereas if you look at younger people, especially if you have a young population and and the population keeps growing, there's more and more young people that are coming up. You're more willing to take risks because there's an increasing consumer market growing in each generation. Whereas if you have the reverse, you are going to be naturally risk adverse. And I think this is because Japan is famous for being risk adverse, is what they would say, right? The Japanese were very adverse to taking risks when it came to loans, when it came to investing, when it came to anything like that. And that's actually become a massive issue. Another massive issue is that the Japanese are not willing to spend money on things that are new, because the average, as you just said, the average age in Japan is like 50 something of this, or late 40s, early 50s. It's very old population. These guys are boomers. They don't know, they don't really understand the intricacies of smartphones, or they don't really have the fine grasp on the internet and how to use it, how to utilize it. They're not really interested in streaming. Like, there are Japanese streamers, but if you consider like proportional based on their population, because there's such a small percentage of their population that's young, they're not investing in this stuff. And you see Japan falling behind relative to for example, China to a relative extent. And I think this is because the population is aged to the point where these old people are not interested in investing and spending money on these technologies. They're interested in ensuring their security for their retirement, right? They want to make sure that their retirement is safe and stable. That's their primary 100% concern. And the funny thing is that this has created a huge problem in Japan, because Japan, they've produced, so, like as I just said, like they're so productive with what they export to the rest of the world. But by contrast, their domestic consumer market is so small compared to what they're exporting, that their yen, the Japanese yen, as a result, is appreciating in value to a very high degree. And it creates a huge problem because the Japanese have an enormous amount of public debt in yen. And as a result, if the yen increases in value, their debt increases in value. And this is a huge problem for the Japanese economy.
So they're screwed.
Yeah. So what they have to do is they basically have to keep printing yen, and this is why the
Which will
Americans
cause
have used the
inflation.
Japanese to keep turning over their debt, because they can rely on the Japanese printing yen because they have no other alternative. Their public debt is so high that they cannot risk allowing the yen to increase in value, and their trade surplus is so high that if they stop printing yen, their yen will just shoot up through the roof in value, and it will completely fuck their debts. So as a result, they have to keep printing yen.
Well, as they say, money machine goes.
Yeah, that's
Anyway,
exactly what's happening. God bless them, because I mean, you can't hate the Japanese because they're a victim of their own success. They've worked so hard, they've slaved so hard to produce one of the most productive economies. I think they are the most productive economy on the planet per person, and it's completely destroyed them. It's destroyed their culture. It's destroyed everything. What does it even mean to be Japanese now, right? Like if you look at Japanese, what do? They like what 60-70% of Japanese men are incels, something like that. Like most of them are just watching anime.
yeah, you could say they tried so hard, but in the end, it didn't even matter. But guys, we are going on.
Yeah, fuck it, yeah, straight out of the 90s, man.
But we are going on a little over 2 hours here, so I do want to start wrapping this one up. So I'll open it up for final thoughts in a minute, in case there's any points that we might have missed here tonight. I do want to say I'm impressed. Out of everything that happened here tonight, and I think we touched on some really good some really good topics here. We are 2 hours and 11 minutes into a Blackpill related stream, and I have not heard one person say cope yet. Which that's just, I find that infuriating and want to smack people for that.
Don't tempt us.
No. Well, I know someone's gonna do it now that I said it, but we made it.
I feel the C word. I feel the C word on my tongue.
Yeah, it's a COPE next Tuesday, but Limerick cope. Yep, there it is. But all right, guys. I do want to start wrapping things up, because we're going a little over 2 hours here, and it just starts to droll on at this point. All right, why don't we go around the room and we can do our takeaways. So first, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I didn't get much get into the show, but I know what to expect from Blackpill 2021. Mercer, yourself, and I think if I go back to listen to the show, I'll only be impressed. The Blackpill and this current sphere is, I think, it's getting to a turmoil position as with the whole manosphere right now, and that's a good thing, honestly, because we've only heard the same narrative repeated over and over again, and it's gone stale. It's gone stale because I think people are like us, and they observe something totally different that's going on in their communities and in their anecdotal experiences. And when you start to talk about this on a mass scale, people report back, and they actually start to change their minds a bit. And I think what Blackpill 2021 is doing with the K-pop thing is being misinterpreted by a lot by saying, oh, well, you're seeing Korean men at the top. Well, it's not necessarily. We're saying that this Korea K-pop example is an example of how sociology can affect the perceptiveness of attractiveness. That's the thing. And I think the white halo JDW effect is based on decades, or if not centuries, of the European accomplishments that are no longer there and are receding. And that's where we see, these racial based. It's not. I really doubt that it's biological. I think it's all sociological when it comes to race. And I think the sociological factor is stronger than the lookism factor, for sure. That's what I would observe, because the social healthy populations, the Hispanics, some Asian types, Filipinos, Vietnamese, I see them, even they have worse aesthetics, these men are able to do much better than the average white guy, the above average white guy. Unfortunately, dating apps and the dating arena, specifically online, has really skewed things, because using Tinder is just ridiculous, honestly, for anything methodical or to prove a point, because it's a sample size, it's a sample biased number. Sample bias refers to, when doing surveys of people of like back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, they were calling the house during business hours. So the man's out of the house and only the woman's there. So, that's where sample bias came from. You were just sample sizing a bunch of housewives. So you have very skewed result. And that's the same with dating apps. They're Tinder's 90% male, Bumble's 80% male, Match's 75 to 80. They're very terrible representations of the general population. And unfortunately, the autistic, the right brain side of this community there's a reason they're overrepresented here, of course, but they've gained control of the narrative, and that's the narrative they push. Is just the complete truth isn't there, and I hope that what we're doing here today is going to push the envelope back to a nice equilibrium that's going to be more towards what the reality is. And I think the Hispanic, looking at the Hispanic side and looking at the K-pop side, those are very good case studies on to prove, the sociological pill, I guess. That's it from me.
Awesome. And one thing I wanted to add to that, and I don't want to go too nuanced into this, is I think you're right. Like that's not to say, right, that like obviously like I'm not making the assertion that every black pill incel actually has a confirmed diagnosis of autism or whatever, but that it is a common trait that I noticed. There are autistic like traits, and a thing that I wanted to call is that a stereotypical trait of a person with autism is they like numbers. They like clearly defined measurable criteria. Height, a jaw length, interpupillary distances, things you can measure and get hard sciences. But so I understand that like we would kind of to an autist, you would kind of want to fixate on something like bone structure because that's very measurable. But I don't think they want to. I don't think this archetype of person likes to accept that there are things that go into this that can't. It's like what my brother was saying, that can't be measured. Like that lead to success, but you don't know why, and we don't know the actual root of it, and it's a pride thing. It's just like, hey, we don't understand the full story.
Yeah.
Right. Who's next?
But I think BP 2021 will have you bring it home. So Mercer, you wanna come next? You wanna go next?
Yeah, sure. So I am kind of 50-50 on this because I will say, on the one hand, I do think that there are, just based on, because I'm interested in anthropology as well. It's one of my side hobbies is researching anthropology. And looking into sort of the historical descriptions of different populations over time, I have noticed that there are certain commonalities that keep popping up. Typically, they're involved with both height and also skin color and also phenotype, like not necessarily face shape, but body shape. So I don't know if I would say that there is. I'm not 100% like a social structure kind of guy. I do believe that there is a significant correlation between like being both tall and. Now I'm coming from somebody who's short, by the way. I'm almost the same height as you are, you fucking manlet, Jade Tahoe. Pretty much the same height.
I have a better manlet house. But anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, so I have noticed that there is a universal preference for both tall and fair, but not too white, and generally, certain facial phenotypes seem to be desired, and you do see this universally throughout cultures. Like we're talking both Muslim cultures where they were the dominant faction, and they were importing slaves of different phenotypes. And also East Asian populations like the Chinese, when they would describe the Xiaonu people who were some kind of Western Eurasians that were slightly mixed with Europeans. But you do kind of see this sort of thing repeat itself over and over again. Though I do think that ultimately this discussion is going to become a moot point because within about, I would say 200 years, Europeans, specifically like Northern Europeans, are going to become either extinct or such a small minority that even talking about them is going to be similar to talking about like the Dinka in South Sudan. You know, like it's going to be that level of sort of obscurity. When it comes to the social factors, though, that's primarily what's going to we're going to end up. I don't know if you guys ever read articles about Neanderthals and like all the sort of theories about why Neanderthals went extinct, where they were talking about like they were saying, well, Neanderthals, if you look at like what they were capable of doing, like they had like these industrial practices that were on par or even superior to like what was present with modern humans. You know, how could they have possibly gone extinct? And then they would theorize, well, maybe it's because they were not as socially adept as Homo sapiens were, and that's why they went extinct, because they were not capable of organizing in larger groups, and they were just less fertile because they were less capable of organizing large sort of coherent societies.
The Homo
I think
sapiens
that's
were
what we're going
teamwork.
to see in the long term.
They were teamwork.
Yeah, going back, that's what we're going to see. We're going to see in the long term. People are going to look back on this and they're going to say, why did this particular ethnic group fail? And we're going to compare.
Does anybody? Mercer just got really muffled. Can you guys hear him?
Yeah, I his volume like went low for me.
Mercer.
So we're going to see. Okay, so we're going to see Europeans go extinct first, and then we're going to see probably a very large bottleneck of East Asians. They might go extinct too. It's hard to say, but definitely Europeans are going to talk about like, why did this population group go extinct? You know, what caused their demise? And I think that's what they're going to come back to. They're going to talk about exactly what we're talking about right now. Kids, these colleges in two separate parts of the entire country. They no coherent social bonds that are rooted in like a location where they can form communities. You know, like they just create these isolated individual networks where like the connections they have are with their friends. Like, there's no biological connections being formed. You see the same thing with East Asians, though. I don't know. There might still be some hope, depending on. Because there's far more East Asians than there are Europeans. We're talking about young people. So there might still be some hope for them to turn it around. But as far as Europeans are concerned, I think it's pretty much GG for us.
GG. Yeah, all right. So Mercer says it's GG, no RE. Limerick says he faded away like a Neanderthal. All right. So Blackpill 2021. Thank you, by the way. I know this stream went a little longer than we'd planned, but I do want to, get us out of here on this note. So you wanna bring us home?
Yeah, sure. Actually, just to touch on what Mercer said, it actually was a bullet point I wanted to get to, so perhaps this is appropriate happenstance. Just touching on Neanderthals and the idea of what First also said, that lack of being able to cooperate. Getting back to Darwinian biology, people might not know this, but Darwin was very unique because he highly valued IQ and he highly valued EQ. And in fact, if you look up Darwin, you'll notice that he did talk about eugenics, but what a lot of people might not know is that his idea of eugenics actually didn't have really anything to do with phenotype. His idea of eugenics was about noticing how wealthier families tended to have more intelligent people and people that had greater morality. And he thought that if humans were truly supposed to reach their evolutionary potential, you wanted to have wealthier people intermix and populate the society more, because you wanted to have a higher distribution of people that tended to be smarter and people that tended to be, or rather to have more morality. Because when you have more morality, you're able to have people work together and cooperate and support one another and protect each other. And they understand that in order to optimize production and performance, you can delegate people that are better equipped when they have the skills and the traits. You can organize society in a more sensible way, and that maximizes productivity. So, just to bring this home, everything that we've discussed, we can certainly acknowledge biology, we can certainly acknowledge lookism, but what Darwin himself really valued, and he thought that if humans were supposed to reach their evolutionary zenith, things like IQ and EQ, things that, like that run along morality and sociological factors are extremely important. And I think when we, do this overview of all these different societies and countries, and we're raising these questions, that's what we're doing. We're making an observation and realizing that this is a multidisciplinary discussion, and there are many factors that contribute to this.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for that. I think that was a very good and succinct overview. So all right. Well, we are at almost 2.5 hours. So I don't know about you guys, but it's getting late here on the East Coast. So I want to thank everybody for their contributions tonight. Blackpill 2021. This was great. I think our audience really valued what you had to say. You were definitely one of the most popular guests I've had thus far. So we'll definitely have to do this again sometime.
Yeah, thanks, man. I'm actually surprised because it's like when I get the hatred, that's what I sort of like. I was sort of hoping I'd get some haters, but
yeah, we really did not get a lot of haters tonight. I'm actually
cool.
It's almost unnerving. It's usually just people telling me that I'm coping and I'm an idiot and all kinds of stuff. So it's tonight was a little off. Yeah.
Yeah. No problem.
Well, we're talking about the incel Maddox crowd, right?
I mean, I'm in a couple of servers, so we get a very mixed audience.
Well, yeah. If we're talking about the incel Maddox crowd, we're pretty nuanced when it comes to what we talk about, right? I mean, I would actually say lookism is at the very back of what we talk about. Pretty much everything else is. Like as I said, one of the most important things we talk about, and what is first is talked about is the importance of social circles in forming relationships, right? You don't hear this from most of these servers, and this is where they get stuck in these thought loops, and they never end up getting out of where they started from. And it becomes a pretty pointless endeavor to even talk to them.
True. It becomes kind of a exercise in futility because it's people who aren't going to be swayed. But all right. So thank you everybody. First, Mercer, our other guests as well. I want to end the stream. My final thought here is definitely some thought-provoking content tonight. I would say that my takeaway is that what I maintain steadfast that it's society that influences what's viewed as attractive, not the other way around. But hey, we definitely can dive more into this into another stream. It's just saying make it an all-nighter. No, this isn't Face and LMS.
Yeah,
but anyway, guys, thank you guys for joining, and take care, everyone.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Later.
Bye, guys.